What's up, everybody? Good morning to all my listeners and all my followers. Today, I'm very excited about this one because I'm very curious on this guy's preparation and game plan. I mean, obviously, he's not going to tell me, word for word the game plan, but I'm just curious on how he's going to take this one in because his opponent, James Gallagher. It's not just about the fists, and the knees and his submissions. He does that mental warfare. He talks a lot. So you have to think: do I even engage? Should I just brush it off? Do I come at him as hard as he's coming at me? Like his last opponent, Ricky Bendejas. He just kind of just took it all in, didn't say a word, and then after he knocked him out, he kind of started celebrating. But my guest here today, Stephen Graham, is making his Bellator debut against James Gallagher on February 23rd at 135 pounds. Now, I think James is kind of better at 145, but he said he can make 135. First off, this being your first fight in Bellator, how many fights did they sign you for? Are you allowed to say how many?
I'm just signed for this fight for now, but after I beat him, I'm sure we'll negotiate a nice contract.
Yeah. So before you even found out about this, did you was you a fan of Gallagher? Like before you ever. First of all, are you a fan of Connor? Because a lot of people compare James to Connor, and obviously, he has characteristics, similar traits. He grew up with him. Even if you'll watch Connor's old DVD, the Notorious, that old series that they did, where when before he even fought Aldo, like they were following him with cameras. When he fought Dustin Poirier and Diego Brandao and all those, he had James in his apartment, like with him when James was a little kid. So Connor has a lot of love and thinks a lot of James, and I'm sure James the same for Connor. But before you knew you were going to fight or any of that, did you like watching their fights, Connor and James?
I like watching Connor's more than I do James. Connor's obviously at this point a lot more polished as a fighter. Obviously has a lot more fights. I mean, Connor's
Yeah.
probably somewhere over 20 professional fights. James is, you
Relatively
know,
new.
yeah, relatively new. Yeah, he's only this will be his ninth professional fight.
7-1.
For me, Connor was always listening to Connor in the early days. Now I don't really like to listen to him as much, but listening to him before he really blew up was really cool, and listening to the way that his mind works and stuff like that was always cool. And even when he brings it up now is actually pretty nice. But I knew who James was. I watched his fights just from watching fights. I saw him get knocked out in his last one, and I've seen a couple of them beforehand. But no, it wasn't anything like I was a fan or anything. So
Yeah, because like a lot of people, they talk about the shit talk and then the trash talking from James, but he actually has a good record. Before this against Ricky, he was undefeated. And what stuck out to me, I really wasn't on the train, so to speak, until he beat Chinzo Machida. Chinzo Machida, he's a legit fighter, brother Lyoto, and that was at Bellator, New York City. And James, took him down, strangled him, beat him relatively easy. I think to a lot of people they get overshadowed with the trash talk and he's got no skills at all. Well, no, his jujitsu is actually very very good. And I looked up your highlight reel, and one thing that sticks out to me is your jujitsu. Your guillotine, a whole lot of guillotine attempts, a whole lot of guillotine wins. And are you still a brown belt or have you transitioned to a black belt?
I actually got my brown belt the week of my last fight.
Mm, so,
So in September.
so you're a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is
Mhm.
the very very high level.
Mhm.
James always says that people don't want to mess with my grappling. They don't want to fuck with me on the ground. Are you making it a point to? Well, maybe I'm gonna try to submit this guy. Obviously, if you can land a head kick or a punch or something and knocks him out, that's great. But would it mean more to you to go in and submit him, considering he's so well versed in jujitsu?
Uh, for me, it doesn't really matter how you get the fight done. Is how you get the fight done. So whether I land a punch, whether I land a kick, whether I land a knee, elbow, whatever, or a submission, either way, ground and pound, however I get it done is how I get it done. For me, it doesn't really matter too much as to how I finish it, as long as I finish it.
So you mentioned the one fight deal, and really this is the test, really. Like they're and this is no surprise to you that they're hoping James wins. They're going to Dublin. They're gonna have a huge walkout for him. He's gonna taunt, he's gonna scream in your face, "I'm back, I'm here." The typical James Gallagher shit, but
Yep.
they're hoping he puts on a show and goes up and grabs that mic and says, "I'm back" after a win. But
Hmm.
if you win, if you do pull this out, no matter how it is, you are right up there with title contention. I mean, in Bellator, I've had other Bellator fighters on, and Bellator's different than the UFC. Like the UFC right now, you've got guys on 7, 8, 9 fight win streaks that we don't even know. The
Hmm.
guys who fought on prelims or undercards who have won 6, 7 in a row, and Bellator, and they're not even thought of in title contention yet. And
Hmm.
Bellator, it seems like you can get 3 or 4 really good wins, and you're right there knocking on the door. If you beat James, realistically, you're probably a fight or two away from a title shot.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, I would. I want a couple fights in Bellator. Honestly, I think I'm still somewhat of a developing fighter. James is a developing fighter as well. Um, so I would like two or three more before we get into that. But I'll be ready for whatever happens. I mean, honestly, I'm flying over to Dublin and I'm going to fight in front of 13,000 Irish fans who probably
Hostile
hate my guts.
territory. Very hostile territory.
Yeah. Although I have received a lot of messages actually from Ireland saying that they're rooting for me and stuff like that, and they hate James and all that. So it's actually kind of cool to hear that. I've had a lot of Irish people message me and be like, "Hey, really hope to pull this out." Blah blah blah. Some really cool stuff. So
So I mentioned earlier that James, his fight was with Ricky is at 130 was at 135, and that was his bantamweight debut. Who's the bantamweight champion right now? Caldwell, right? Darian Caldwell.
yes,
So
yeah,
so Caldwell, he just lost to Horiguchi, but he's still the champion, obviously.
yeah.
So Caldwell's your bantamweight, and the 145 has the Pitbull brothers.
Hmm.
James, I think James is better suited for 145. He's got to cut weight, which, are you a big 135er yourself, or are you kind of fit right in there where I can make 145 easily?
I've actually fought a lot of my fights at 45. Um, Personally, I think I'm an in betweener. I think I could go down to 25 at some point. It would be a lot of weight to drop. Is it possible? If somebody shows me the right plan, I think we could do it. But I think I'm an average size 135er. I have 15, 20 pounds to cut on a normal cut.
Because he is a relatively big guy for 135 pounds. Like even at 145, he's kind of lanky, but at 135, I'm assuming he has to cut a lot more weight.
See, I really don't think he's actually that big as far as 135. I think we're really going to be around the same weight. Um, I think he's just one of those guys that didn't necessarily know how to cut weight, so he fought some of his fights or well, most of his fights, of course, at 145, and he's still learning and adjusting to cutting weight.
So a lot of people jumped off the bandwagon immediately after Ricky knocked him out. And actually, I've went back and I've watched that fight 100 times. And I'm personally a Gallagher fan. I like him. He's entertaining. He's fun to listen to, but he backs it up. I mean, he's only lost one fight. What's your record, by the way? He's 7-1. What's yours?
I'm 6-3.
6-3. So you're both right around the same amount of fights, right around the same amount of
Hmm.
experience. So, but James, people get carried away, like I said earlier, with his mouth. They don't focus on his fights. So when Ricky come out and Ricky was like 10-1 at the time, I think Ricky was very experienced and only had one loss himself. And he come out and they were filling each other out. James was landing some good leg kicks. He throws a lot of leg kicks and he's got that karate style stance almost. But James, and he even said on the Ariel show, I don't know if you watched it, that I just come in looking to fight. I wasn't worried about a game plan, or I wasn't worried about technique. I was just looking for a scrap, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that can get you in trouble. First,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought second that he handled that loss great. He come out and he's like, I got beat, but I'm not broken. I got beat, but I'm not gonna shy away and shell up and take it like take it like a man, like a champ really should. Do you think all that's bullshit, or do you think he really believes that deep down?
For me, it doesn't matter what he thinks and what his belief is. I hope he believes in himself, and I hope he believes everything that comes out of his mouth. Um, but for me, there's going to be some psychological damage to losing your first fight. Like, I don't know if you lost as an amateur or anything like that.
One
But
time.
there is a confidence loss for most people. For him, we don't know yet. Like, we don't know till we come out in this fight. If there's any psychological damage from that. Honestly, I think there will be to a degree. Um, but for me, it doesn't really matter. For me, I focus on myself more than anything, and I'm not really worried about him.
So mental warfare is definitely going to be a play in this one, and like I mentioned earlier, are you the top to even engage? Like, are you, if he messaged you on Twitter and says this, and that, are you the one to tag him and go right back, or do you just say, yeah, we'll fight, the better man? Because you've got those trash talkers like Connor who just say anything and everything. And then you
Mm.
got some guys that'll just say, like, yeah, I'm going to try my hardest and I'm going to, good luck to you, good luck to me, basically. And then you got some people that won't even engage. How are you going to handle James at the weigh-in when he gets right up nose to nose with you and tries to intimidate you? Are you the kind to relax and take it easy, or more of a hothead, get mad and go right back at him top?
I'm not gonna back down at all. Am I gonna sit there and get in his face and do the exact same thing that he's doing? No. But I'm not gonna back down at all. For me, I don't need to say anything. We're gonna get in a cage and we're gonna fight. So so we can handle whatever needs to be handled in there. If you want to say anything on social media or whatever, like, I don't really care. I honestly haven't seen, heard, or whatever of anything he said leading up to this fight, and I honestly don't care. Um, but for me, if he's going to get in my face, and that's fine. We're fighters. We're getting each other's face, and we'll meet in the middle, and the better man's going to win, and that'll be me.
You have to have belief in yourself. Just he believes in himself. Every fighter believes you have to. That's you have to when you're fist fighting another man. But is it a lot of people? Some would say that this is too much for your Bellator debut. I'm sure you've heard that, or at least suspected that some people
Yeah.
that this is too much too soon. They're both relatively like right around the same amount of fights. Right around the same amount of experience, but this is. Like I said, it's no surprise what they want to happen. It's no surprise what they
Yeah.
want to happen.
Yeah.
Does that bother you at all, or you're just playing the part of spoiler? You're just going in as the away team and looking for a home victory.
Actually, I'll give you a story. My very first fight, as an amateur, and even some recent fights. But my very first fight as an amateur, I fought on a promotion against an opponent whose team ran the show, and I was lied to about his record and what his record was. He had twice the amount of fights that was said, and after the fight, they told me the truth. And actually, that guy ended up fighting recently on Dana White's Contender Series, so he ended up being a really really good fighter. Um, and there were 13 fights that night. 12 of those 13, their guys won. I was the spoiler that night. And even a couple fights ago, I went into a guy's hometown, a Bellator vet, and I subbed him in a minute and 6 seconds. So obviously, this is going to be that so much bigger than any of that. But for me, it's what I've always wanted. I've always wanted to be on this big stage in a main event, and beat a guy like James and stuff like that. So they can say it's too quick, it's too soon, it's too much. But for me, I know I was made to do this. So I'm going to go in there with full confidence in myself and make that flight there and get a nice W and enjoy Dublin and come back in and enjoy the spoils.
So where do you live? And where do you live though?
I live in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to take a long ass plane ride to get
Yeah,
there.
it's going to be long.
So I'm sure you go like a week in advance, right? You go like 7 days before or something like that to
Yes.
get used to the
Yeah.
sleep schedules. Because like if you here, we get used to a certain time. Like over there, it would be earlier. And do you know like is your fight a nighttime fight? Will it be live or in first? Is it DAZN or is it on Paramount?
I think it will be taped and aired later in the day in the U.S. On Paramount. I actually don't know for sure, but that's what I think is going to happen. What I've been told is because of the 6 hour time difference,
Yeah.
we will fight. I think fights start at like something like 5 o'clock in Dublin. So we'll probably go somewhere around 10 o'clock in Dublin time. So it'll be somewhere in the afternoon here.
Yeah, I'm sure that does factor in. You get used to different sleep schedules and sleep patterns. Obviously, you don't want to, like somebody like us on the time we're on, you don't want to wake up at 2:30 in the morning and fight.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's gonna be it's like I said, it's gonna be somewhere in the afternoon here.
Which is
So
better.
a couple
Yeah.
hours from what we're talking now. The only thing I'm really gonna do is I'm gonna start waking up a little bit earlier. So 5, 6 o'clock. So that way on Dublin time, I'm 11 noon stuff like that.
So there's a lot of misconceptions too about what goes on in the locker room, before a fight happens. Obviously, the ref comes in and he tells you, and you're getting your hands wrapped and you put the gloves on. I've heard in the past that you only want to get a good sweat going. You don't want to really get a full workout. You just want to get a good sweat going and get loose. You see some people walk out and they're back in the old days and they're just kind of tired looking before the fight happens, and then you see some like Anderson used to just walk out and he wouldn't. It almost looked like he didn't stretch or didn't prep or anything and just walked out and fought. And Robbie Lawler used to not spar. He went years without sparring. Are you what exactly goes on back there? Is it that simple as you just what's the time period from the time your hands are wrapped and you're stretching to actually fight? Is it only like 25, 35 minutes, or is it an hour or two process?
For me, I like to do a couple of like light warm ups, or a couple of different warm ups. So what we'll do is a few hours before the fight, I'll kind of get what we call like get a blow in, to that way, your lungs are acclimated and you kind of got your everything opened up and all that. And you kind of got warm, and then we'll relax for a little bit. And then as we're, three fights away, stuff like that, we'll do some more mitts and we'll get everything firing like fully for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll just kind of keep moving around, shadow boxing, staying loose, and stuff like that until we get ready to go.
So do they like re-weigh you the next day? Because you do a weigh-in. Do they like in the UFC and the other organizations they do, but do they do it in Bellator and other places?
I actually don't know. I assume Bellator will, but honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is your debut, so you're gonna just be experiencing all this for the first time, and
Yeah.
it's crazy that you're the main event too. It's like you're right to the top basically, and like I said,
Throwing right in the fire.
if you're thrown right in the middle of at Dublin with James, who's coming off a loss, which that could be a good thing for him. He could be really hungry and really motivated, or it could be a bad thing. He could be, a little self-doubt. And I think it's going to be great either way. And if you win, if you do pull this off, you're going to be, like we said, 2 to 3 fights away from a title fight.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly. It's January of 2019. Realistically, by January of 2020, you could be the number one contender.
Heck yeah. That's what I've worked, almost 10 years for. I started jiu-jitsu, coming up, in a couple months. I started doing jiu-jitsu about 10 years ago. And then, everything else picked up a few years later. So I've been doing this stuff a long time. I've been working for it, and I honestly can't wait. Like we talked about, it may be too much too fast. I don't think so. I'm really ready for all this to happen, and it's something I've always seen happen. Even when I started at 18. I started training jiu-jitsu at 18. This was always the goal. This was always the plan. So it just took a little bit longer than I anticipated, and that's okay.
So you're used to playing the part of spoiler, as we said earlier, and
Mhm.
give me a prediction before we get off here. Give me how's this going down?
I said in an interview, I was asked same thing, and I don't see it going out of the first round. I see me finishing him somehow in the first round. But if he does make it to the second round, the third round, that's okay. I'm the older guy in this one. I'm going to be 6 years older than he is. So there's a lot of life experience in that. And I've already dealt with losses and stuff like that. So I know, bad positions, being away from home, or, not being, the crowd favorite and all that stuff. So all that adversity I'm used to dealing with. He's coming off of, really his first bit of adversity, and he's only 22, or I think 22 years old. So he doesn't hasn't really dealt with a lot of life's terrible experiences yet. So I think those are the key things that are going to play out in this fight.
We could genuinely see like a Cinderella story, like an MMA Cinderella story. Like if you go out there and let's just say you guillotine him in the first round, and then you fight somebody else and you get a win, and then you fight somebody else and you get a win, but like we said earlier, 2020, you're holding the 135-pound title. It'll be like, wow, just a year ago I was debuting as the main event in Dublin against the hometown guy, where they were hoping and expecting him to slaughter me.
Well, actually, it'll kind of be like Connor.
Right?
Because Connor came in like a bat out of hell, and what,
Quick.
1 maybe 2 years into his UFC career, that he had the strap.
Yep. And then moved up and took over the entire game. You could be, the next Bellator's next big star.
I will be.
Man, I appreciate you coming on, though. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to do this episode.
All right, thank you, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, and I'll hit you up after the fight, maybe, and
Yeah,
get you on for a post fight victory interview.
let's do it.
Oh, man, I appreciate you so much. You have a good rest of the day.
All right, you too, brother.
Hope you guys enjoyed this interview with Bellator's newcomer, Stephen Graham. He's making his Bellator debut against James Gallagher. I'm a fan of James. I like this guy. I've watched his highlights. I just talked to him. I think this is going to be a good one. I think that they're gonna engage on the feet a little bit, and then I think we're getting a high-class jiu-jitsu match. We're getting a Brazilian jiu-jitsu brown belt. I don't know if James is a black belt, but he's definitely black belt caliber. I think we're going to see 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 120 seconds, 2 minutes of feeling out leg kicks from James, and then they're gonna go. They're gonna grapple. We're gonna see a high pace, high class jiu-jitsu match between these two. James is very slick on the ground, very sneaky. His arms, he's got like real thin forearms and thin arms, so he can slide chokes and arm locks and positions you wouldn't expect. But this guy, if you haven't looked up Stephen Graham, the first thing you'll see is guillotines. Guillotine City. I mean, he'll take a slam. There's one where he's guillotining the dude, and he actually does a front flip, flaps on his head, and he still holds on to the guillotine. Doesn't get the tap, but this guy will hold on to a guillotine through a fucking tornado. So you're gonna have to earn it. I think this is gonna be a real test for both of them, and I think they're gonna meet in the middle and have a high paced jiu-jitsu match, and may the best jiu-jitsu artist win. But I appreciate you all for watching. Go check him out on Twitter, Stephen Graham. Look him up on YouTube. And February 23rd, he will be facing James Gallagher in Dublin. This is a test, but should be fun. See you guys.